Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host, and we are now in the Narcissist Bag of Tricks, and we're reading from John Powell's book, Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? Now, we're covering the catalog of games and roles. The next one I figured I would cover would be one that comes up in some of the others that are yet to come. Inferior and Guilty. Psychoanalytic literature distinguishes between inferiority feelings and guilt feelings, though both are manifestations of some kind of conflict between the actual self and the ideal self. The inner struggle is between what we actually are, between what we actually do or feel, and what we think or should do or feel. The fundamental difference is that in inferiority feelings, there is a recognition of weakness and inadequacy. People who suffer from inferiority feelings usually create competition and aggression. They seek to eradicate their feelings of being inferior by showing their superiority in some kind of rivalry. Guilt feelings, on the other hand, can be verbalized. I'm not much good. Most of what I want to do, my desires, and have done, my deeds, seem mean and evil. I really deserve contempt and punishment for my failures. Now, guilt feelings inhibit the competitive spirit. They are reactions to a hostile and aggressive impulse that we feel within ourselves. Now, to remove these guilt feelings, we may try to renounce competition, while inferiority feelings usually invite us to a competitive attitude. I'll show you. Guilt feelings usually persuade us to subordination. They usually surface in self-depreciation and even self-punishment. People generally try to free themselves from inferiority feelings by having ambition and being in competition, by trying to get revenge or to get the upper hand. The extrication from guilt feelings is usually attempted through submitting and the avoiding of any hostile or aggressive behavior. Inferiority feelings tend to produce rebels. Guilt feelings tend to create conformists with modest and submissive ways. He tells us that ambition and competition remain restricted to the imagination and the fantasy life of guilt-ridden people. Usually they're retiring, non-conspicuous types who readily avoid contradictions. They've got a tendency to minimize their own abilities, and after behaving in a way that their conscience cannot approve, the people with the guilt feelings usually resolve that they will never again do the same thing. People with inferiority feelings more often react by asking, well, why not? Why not do these things? I'm not going to give in to external pressures on my conduct. Next on the list, the cynic. The excessive expectations of life many times collapse and result in the cynic game. People who are programmed to think that this universe should be tailor-made to their comfort many times will suffer a painful collision with reality. At this point, they strike back with their cynicism. Basically, cynics are demoralized unrealists. Things have failed to turn out the way they wanted, and so these cynics take their pains of disillusion out on everybody. You can't trust anyone. The whole system's corrupt. Well, it is. As long as they persist in their role as cynic, they won't have to take an honest look at themselves and their world, nor go through the pains required to adjust to reality. Their facile wit is usually a symptom of submerged antagonism. They have not found life as they wanted it to be. They've never learned how to have empathy or tolerance, and they've never experienced a true affection for others. Consequently, they are very lonely people behind their sardonic smirks. Oh, so next on the list would be fragile. Handle with care. I have known people like this throughout my existence. usually in grade school or junior high. But fragile people give many advanced signals to others that they are delicate and need to be babied or handled with great caution. Others are reluctant to confront people who have ready-to-go tear ducts and are capable of instant depressions. Nobody wants to deliver bad news to these types of people or to ask them to accept any kind of responsibility. It's much easier to take it on ourselves or to offer them honest criticism. Fundamentally, this game grows out of a neurotic feeling of inability to cope with what we call life. Fragility players exhibit a great sensitivity to the estimate of others. Their ego is tender. Remarks or gestures are often misinterpreted. Fragile people are hypersensitive precisely because they place very little value on themselves. This, however, will usually not be clear to themselves or to most other people. Fragility represents a regression to childhood, to a state of need and being helpless. If the game is played successfully, these players will never have to grow up or face the blood, sweat, and tears of real life. Fragile people express with their sudden tears and traumas what children say with their tantrums and screaming. The demand is for the preferential treatment children so often require. Next on the list would be the martyr. The persecution complex, which is paranoia, of the martyr is an emotional disorder which has been characterized by many false suspicious beliefs. Paranoid trends are observed in one kind of schizophrenia, a mental disorder in which the sick person is separated or split from reality. In neurotic paranoiacs, the outstanding characteristic is suspicion. They suffer from what psychologists call delusions of reference. Such delusions convince paranoid people that everybody's talking about them, that it rains on the day of their parade because God is holding something against them personally, and so on. It is a feeling that they feel like they're being abused. It should be said that something of this feeling is in all of us at times. It's very normal for people to have, but in the normal, or whatever that is, person, these delusions are not so irrational or so extreme, or crippling. The paranoid people often find themselves in the same predicament as liars, who must invent stories to justify their misrepresentation of the facts. Eventually, these delusions become systematized, and paranoid individuals tend to hang on to them in spite of all the apparent inconsistencies. The persecutory delusions usually grow from an inferiority complex. People with such delusions hate their own inadequacy and project their thinking onto the minds of others. They conclude that others must hate them too. They just can't establish satisfactory relationships with others and are generally oversensitive. Their egos are very tender. In feeling rejected by others, they gradually withdraw into themselves and become increasingly estranged and alienated from others. Then, they're not able to check their imagined interpretations of the facts that they're misjudging. They feel that they were not suspicious enough of other people and that others took advantage of them. Now they're way too suspicious and they feel they just cannot trust anybody. Now, normal social relations are impossible to sustain with such an attitude of mind. All of us are somewhat suspicious. The opposite of this normal awareness would be gullibility or naivete. Paranoiacs have gone much too far. They play their game by blaming others for their mistakes. This habit, called passing the buck, is a normal part of paranoid delusion. These people also cannot evaluate properly their own responsibility as distinguishable from the role of others in causing their problems. Their own self-deceptions seem absolutely clear and to be true to them. Now, the martyr complex grows out of an unstable self-evaluation and a failure to maintain satisfactory degree of faith in others. The expression is to blame others for our unhappiness. Also, these people are aware of their own hostile feelings. but they rationalize them with their delusions. Their desire is to attack others because they feel persecuted. Delusions in this way are simply attempts to create an imaginary situation in which the symptoms experienced within can appear rational and acceptable. These people's capacity for rationalization is often remarkable, and sometimes they succeed in convincing others of the rationality of their crazy behaviors. Next is the Messiah Jesus. This game calls for a little imagination and an unconscious need to feel important. Messiahs fancy themselves saviors of the human race. It could well be a reaction formation to the fear of insignificance. They seem to think of themselves as the helper and others as being the helped in almost all the relationships. Now, instead of encouraging others to use their own strength and wisdom, these messiahs dutifully lend out theirs. They relate to very few people as equals. If people are attracted to these messiahs because of their good qualities that are not completely submerged by their assumed role, it will be easier for these people if they have a problem or need. It will be an admission ticket. The gain of the game is rather large, expansive feeling, and a long, well-memorized list of those who have been helped. So basically these messiahs have inferiority feelings, and they seek to free themselves from it, dominating others emotionally. So the last one for this evening will be something I'm familiar with in more than one way: strong, silent type versus willing and wordy. Now, which one am I? There are two ways to keep from communicating yourself to others. And because of various types of fears, many of us are reluctant to let other people know who we really are. The two very effective techniques to prevent communication are, number one, which is to say very little. People may think that you are profound if you just don't open your mouth, which I've learned in many cases that's not the case. No mouth open because there's nothing in the head. An old saw says that still waters run deep. The other way is number two, which is to say so much that nobody can possibly sort all of it out or figure out anything about you. You can't say a great deal using this buckshot technique of obscurity without giving a lot of contradictory indications. Nobody can possibly accuse you of not doing your part to communicate. Only the sharper members of the group will realize that they don't know what the hell you've been talking about.
I am the Narcopath, and I know that you and I were through a long time ago. I consider you one of mine, one of my possessions, and I typically, secretly drive by your house every so often, and I must confess, it really crushed my feelings when I drove by on trash day and saw that sculpture that we had made together, tossed with all the trash and broken pieces. Well, not really. Darn, damn, goddamn, I had done that with you for a purpose. It warns me now that maybe you've moved on, so I might need to get my gaslighting skills into gear, because I know how important that sculpture was to you and how it proved to you how much I loved you, or so you thought. I must confess, since I'm doing the confessions anyway, if you notice when I used to come to your home, notice how I brought certain things and left them there. I did that for a reason. I put as many of my belongings as I could in your home. So, once the inevitable point comes where you tell me to get lost, once you figure me out, well, I will have laid the groundwork for my Hoover, using your terms. But yes, I made sure to leave important things in your presence. So once I was gone, you'd have no choice but to look at them and think of me. It's one of the many spells I cast on my target. And I get sick of having to go to the store and buy more stuff to bring to each guy's house, but it pays off here and there. And I'm sure it's going to pay off with you. You can't resist me. I know you can't. If I called you right now and said, I miss you so, please come, I know you would.
So let me get this right. You're really, seriously dumping me. You're dumping me. All because the guy you thought you saw me out with one night, and I told you I didn't know who he was. That wasn't me. That was somebody else who looked like me.
And then you found out I was pregnant, and it just so happened to be that guy? And now you think I was lying to you? Honey, you are sick in the head and paranoid. It was a coincidence, so they made a mistake at the hospital. Give me a break. You don't want to dump me. If you do, I'll be with everyone and your mother and your father. Are you sure you want to give that up? Think about it, because
it's a conspiracy. They did it on purpose because the doctor wants me, and I told him no. So he deliberately mixed up the DNA and blood samples for my pregnancy test. So now we can be happy. It was all a scam. What do you mean, you don't believe me?
You think I would actually lie to you for real? You're hopeless. It's over. Besides, I've got somebody else.
You never satisfy me, baby. That's so take again, take too long. So do you want to take my last impression? Talk to me, so many questions, so don't leave me, 'cause I might follow. So if you look at me, my last impression, talk to me, so many questions, so don't leave me, 'cause I might follow. I want something to there's so much time to spend. You never satisfy me, baby. Your eyes just burn around your waist. You're the spirit of the sky. You never satisfy me. So take us again. So do you want to be my last impression? Talk to me, so many questions, don't leave me, 'cause I'm not for love. So will you look at me, my last impression? Talk to me, so many questions, don't leave me, 'cause I'm not for love.
Sing along with me. Jesus! Jesus! Who is it you're calling for again? Sandy, what? Did you just call me a hooker? You got the wrong number. Sorry, don't call here again.